Imagine looking at a solid brick wall, like just a completely normal brick wall.
Right, something you see every day.
Exactly. And your entire life, you've been told that this wall is solid. I mean, classical physics basically drilled it into your head that it's solid.
Oh, yeah, and your own bruised knuckles would definitely agree if you tried to punch it.
Right. It is undeniably aggressively solid.
Yeah.
But what if I told you that until the exact millisecond you actually glanced at it, that wall didn't exist in any physical form at all?
Wait, like it wasn't there.
Yeah. Like, what if, before your eyes and your consciousness interacted with it, that wall was literally nothing more than a hazy wave of mathematical probability just floating in a void?
I mean, that sounds completely like science fiction or, a very intense philosophical thought experiment designed to give you a headache.
It really does. But welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into the deep end today. And I know what you might be thinking right now. You're probably sitting there thinking, okay, I've heard this pitch before.
Yeah, the classic self-help pitch.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is just another rehash of The Secret. We're going to talk about vision boards, positive vibes, and how if I just wish really, really hard for a sports car, it'll just magically appear in my driveway.
Which, to be fair, is how this stuff is usually presented online.
Totally. But stick with us, because we are going far, far beyond modern self-help platitudes today.
Absolutely.
We're diving into this conceptual framework where ancient esoteric mysticism directly collides with the literal mathematical dilemmas of quantum mechanics. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. Because the premise we're exploring today is not about adopting a cheerful attitude to make your workday go faster.
Right, it's way bigger than that.
It is an exploration of a universal architecture where the human mind is the supreme, absolute ruler of physical matter. We are talking about the ontological foundation of reality itself.
Yeah, and our jumping off point today comes from a translation of this really fascinating piece from the YouTube channel La Biblioteca Ancestral, which translates to the Ancestral Library.
Such a great channel. It really is.
Yeah.
And the piece is titled The Mind Controls Everything, Metaphysical Secrets They Don't Want You to Know.
A bold title.
Very bold. And the mission of our deep dive today is to really unpack that profound esoteric claim. We are going to explore the idea that the physical reality you're interacting with right now, yes, you, listening to this, is an illusion projected by human consciousness.
Which is a secret that has been, historically speaking, intensely guarded.
And violently suppressed.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into. But it's now finding these weird echoes in modern science.
We really need to frame the stakes here right at the top, I think. If you accept the argument being presented in this material, it completely shatters the default human worldview.
How so?
Well, the default setting for almost everyone listening is that we are these small, fragile entities moving through a massive, indifferent universe, right?
Yeah, like things just happen to us.
Exactly. The weather happens, the economy fluctuates, accidents occur, and we just react to it all. But the concept we're unpacking today posits the exact inverse of that.
That we aren't just moving through a pre-existing universe.
Right. It argues that the universe is continuously responding to and literally being constructed by your internal mental state.
And if you're joining us today, the esoteric framework we're discussing actually suggests that this specific moment, like you choosing to listen to this exact deep dive right now, is not a random accident of the algorithm.
Oh, yeah, the concept of synchronicity.
Yes. It frames this as synchronicity. The idea is that the very fact you are engaging with this information means something inside your consciousness is waking up.
You're ready for the knowledge, basically.
Exactly. Your mind manifests the opportunity to hear it.
Synchronicity implies a deeply meaningful coincidence. It's the universe, or, well, your own projected reality, aligning specific information with your mind at the exact moment your psychological architecture is prepared to integrate it.
But I have to say, there's a massive warning attached to this in the source material.
There always is with knowledge this heavy.
Right. Once you see the strings controlling the puppet, you really can't go back to pretending the puppet is alive on its own. To really understand the immense power of the mind, we can't just jump into the modern scientific validation.
No, you need the historical context.
We have to trace the roots of this wisdom back to a time when it was a recognized universal truth. And then we have to meticulously examine how and why it was deliberately buried.
Because if a piece of knowledge is genuinely that powerful, I mean, if it grants the individual absolute sovereignty over their reality, it becomes incredibly disruptive.
How massively disruptive to any institution in power.
Exactly. Any institution that relies on the dependency of the masses cannot allow that information to spread. History is ruthlessly curated by those who need to maintain the status quo.
So let's trace this back, like way back. The foundation of this philosophy takes us to the pyramids of Egypt.
Deep into the ancient world.
Yeah, into the shadows of the ancient Hermetists and the mystery school of Thoth. And they operate on this fundamental principle that basically kicks off this entire worldview.
The all is mind. The universe is mental.
Yes, the all is mind, the universe is mental.
It's vital to understand that the Hermetists were not speaking in, like, poetic metaphors here.
Right, they weren't just being dramatic.
No, when a modern person says, oh, it's all in your head, they usually mean your emotional perception is skewed.
Like you're imagining a problem that isn't there.
Exactly. But when the ancient Hermetists stated the universe is mental, they were defining the literal structural mechanics of creation.
They were saying the entire cosmos is essentially a vast field of conscious energy. Like every thought, every feeling is a primordial vibration that actively molds reality.
Everything you see, touch, interact with, it's all just a condensed manifestation of mental energy.
Yeah, and long before modern physics began theorizing that matter is just densely vibrating energy, these ancient thinkers, these early alchemists, operated on that exact assumption.
They did. And altering physical matter for them was never about mixing literal chemicals in a beaker.
Right, it wasn't a chemistry class.
True alchemy was the transmutation of internal consciousness, which they believed would inevitably force a transformation in the external physical world.
There's actually a 10th century alchemist mentioned in the text, Paracelsus, who had a brilliant way of summing this up.
Oh, Paracelsus is fascinating.
He argued that the outer world is nothing more than a reflection of the inner mind. But it wasn't just the alchemists in Egypt saying this. We see this echoing loudly through classical Greek philosophy, too.
Oh, definitely. You can't talk about this without mentioning Plato.
Right. We all know Plato and the Republic.
Yeah.
But we usually get the watered-down middle school version of his ideas.
Yeah, the basic allegory, the cave, where people think shadows on the wall are reality until someone walks outside and sees the sun.
Exactly. But the deeper philosophical implication of Plato's realm of forms is so much more radical than just don't trust shadows.
It really is. Plato argued that the physical reality we inhabit is a flawed secondary derivative.
Like a knockoff.
Pretty much. The true eternal reality is entirely mental. The physical world is just a clumsy shadow cast by the primary absolute light of the mind.
And this is where it gets incredibly intense, historically speaking. Because the Gnostics took Plato's ideas and essentially weaponized them.
They certainly didn't hold back.
Not at all. The early Gnostic texts declared that human consciousness is not trapped in our flesh and blood. It isn't just some byproduct of biological brain function.
Right.
According to the Gnostics, human consciousness is a spark of the authentic creator. The material world is just a projection.
Projection is the critical mechanism here. I think we need to linger on that word.
Let's do it.
It implies a definitive source and a receptive destination. The mind is the projector lens, right? And the physical world is merely the blank screen receiving the light.
I've actually thinking about this whole ancient framework, and it feels a lot like a 3D printer.
Oh, that's a good analogy. How so?
Well, if physical reality, the world around us, is the 3D printed object, then the mind is the digital CAD file on the computer.
That perfectly illustrates the mechanics they were proposing.
Right, because if you print out, say, a plastic wrench, and you don't like the shape of it, you can't change the object by screaming at the plastic.
It's not going to listen to you.
No. And you can't just forcefully squeeze the cold, hardened plastic with your bare hands to reshake it. You'll just break the wrench or exhaust yourself.
Which is what most people spend their lives doing.
Exactly. If you want a different wrench, you have to walk away from the physical object, go back to the computer, and rewrite the digital code. You have to change the source file.
Change the file, change the print.
The ancient esoteric wisdom is basically pleading with us, stop yelling at the plastic of physical reality.
Yeah.
Go rewrite the code in your mind.
And that analogy perfectly captures the baseline frustration of the modern human condition. People are constantly engaged in an agonizing struggle against the hard plastic of their physical reality.
The bills, the relationships, the career.
Exactly. Their financial struggles, their failing relationships, their career plateaus. They are trying to force physical matter to change through sheer, exhausting physical effort.
Squeezing the plastic.
And the Hermetists, Plato, the Gnostics, they are all screaming across the centuries, you are working at the wrong end of the cosmic assembly line.
But this raises a massive, glaring question for me, and the source material gets into this. If this knowledge is the ultimate hack to the universe, if it's literally the source code for human reality, why was it treated as something so incredibly dangerous?
Why the suppression?
Right. Why was this concept silenced, suppressed, and driven completely underground for centuries?
Well, to understand the suppression, you have to look at the mechanics of medieval political and religious power.
Right.
Think about the overarching structure of the medieval church and the feudal system. To maintain a rigid top-down hierarchy, you absolutely require the people at the bottom to believe they are fundamentally powerless.
And you need to feel small.
You need them to believe that their salvation, their success, their safety, and their very reality depend entirely on an external authority.
You need a middleman. The priest, the king, the institution.
Precisely. If you can convince the populace that the world is a dangerous place happening to them and that only the institution can intercede on their behalf, you have engineered absolute control.
Wow, yeah.
But if a human being realizes that they possess the authentic power to create their own world, that their mind is a divine spark shaping the universe, that person no longer requires a middleman.
They are directly plugged into the source code. They don't need a king to grant them land or a priest to grant them grace if they are the architects of their own existence.
And this realization transforms esoteric knowledge from, a quirky philosophical debate into a massive existential threat to dogmatic power structures.
A threat to the bottom line.
Exactly. If the universe is mental and I control my mind, then I am the absolute sovereign of my own reality. A society of sovereign creators cannot be subjugated, taxed, or terrified into submission.
So the knowledge had to go.
Therefore, the knowledge that makes them sovereign must be systematically eradicated.
Which brings us to a really dark chapter in this deep dive. Because the authorities actively hunted this knowledge, it obviously couldn't be debated in the town square.
No, you'd be killed.
Right. It had to go completely underground. It was safeguarded by secret orders, kept alive in whispers and encrypted texts, until the intellectual thaw of the Renaissance allowed brave thinkers to try and bring it back into the light.
We see this preservation effort throughout the Middle Ages with groups like the Rosicrucians, a mystic order operating in deep secrecy, and the Knights Templar.
Yeah, the Templars always pop up in these histories.
They do, and these groups hid profound metaphysical secrets inside incredibly complex rituals.
What I find so fascinating about those rituals is their primary focus. Like, these secret orders understood the 3D printer analogy perfectly.
They knew you had to start at the source.
They knew that mastering the outer physical world required mastering the inner mental world first. So their initiations and rituals weren't just about memorizing handshakes or gaining political leverage.
Far from it.
They were intensely, rigorously focused on the internal purification and perfection of the initiate's consciousness.
Because you cannot fix the physical print until you have perfected the software. The internal mastery of consciousness was the non-negotiable prerequisite for transcending the limitations of physical matter.
But secrets of that magnitude can only stay hidden for so long, right?
Eventually, they leak out.
Eventually, we arrive at the Renaissance, the era of rebirth, and brave individuals start to voice these ancient truths publicly again. And this brings us to Giordano Bruno.
Bruno. A Renaissance philosopher whose story perfectly illustrates the lethal danger of challenging the established paradigm of reality.
Yeah, most people don't know the specifics of what Bruno actually argued. He didn't just say the universe is big.
No, his cosmology was wild for the time. He proposed an infinite universe with absolutely no center, populated by countless suns and planets. But more dangerously, he brought the ancient Hermetic and Gnostic teachings back into the light.
By redefining God.
Yes, by arguing that God, or the divine mind, was not some bearded figure sitting on a throne up there mediating reality. He argued that the divine mind was immanent, meaning it was actively present within all matter, and crucially, within the human mind itself.
It was an ontological rebellion of the highest order. He was essentially arguing that the divine spark that models the universe resides within the individual.
And what was the establishment's response to this brilliant cosmological model?
Well, it wasn't a peer review.
No. They tied him to a pole in a public square in Rome, gagged him so he couldn't speak to the crowd, and burned him alive.
It is a stark, horrific reminder of the violence with which the status quo will defend its monopoly on reality. Bruno's crime wasn't just religious heresy, it was an economic and political threat.
Because he was empowering the individual.
He was trying to hand the keys of creation back to the individual peasantry.
It's just so tragic. But this era also gives us René Descartes. We all know his famous maxim, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am.
The foundation of modern Western philosophy.
Right. But I want to dig into how that actually works in the context of what we're discussing, because it's not just a catchy bumper sticker.
No, it represents one of the most profound epistemological shifts in human history. Before Descartes, the foundation of all truth was considered to be external revelation.
Like God revealing truth through Scripture and the Church.
Exactly. But Descartes decided to strip away absolutely everything he could possibly doubt.
Which was basically everything.
Everything. He doubted his physical senses, because senses can be fooled by illusions. He doubted the physical world entirely. He basically asked, what is the one single thing I cannot possibly doubt?
And the answer was his own mind?
The answer was, the fact that I am experiencing doubt. The fact that I am thinking.
Therefore, the thinking subject, the mind, became the only undeniable, absolute foundation of existence.
And by doing that, Descartes inadvertently shifted the entire philosophical burden of proof. Truth no longer began with external revelation. It began with human cognition.
So even if he didn't grasp the full mystical implications like the Hermetists did, he established the mind as the absolute base of all reality.
He set the stage, mathematically and philosophically, for what was to come.
It really makes you think about how society conditions us today. I mean, we obviously don't burn philosophers at the stake anymore.
Thankfully.
But we are still overwhelmingly conditioned to view ourselves as passive victims of circumstance.
Oh, absolutely. The mechanism of control has just evolved. It is far more subtle now. Instead of the threat of the pyre, we have an overwhelming 247 bombardment of media.
Doom scrolling.
Exactly. Media, economic anxiety, and societal norms that constantly reinforce the narrative that you are small, the global machinery is massive, and your only role is to react and consume.
We are systematically trained to be reactive, not proactive. We're taught to wait for things to happen to us.
Because if you fully internalize what Bruno died for and what Descartes touched upon, if you truly accept that your mind actually creates your reality, you cross a terrifying threshold.
Terrifying because of the responsibility.
Yes. You can no longer blame the economy or your boss or bad luck for your circumstances. You have to take absolute, uncompromising responsibility for your life. And frankly, a lot of people find that level of freedom utterly terrifying.
It is terrifying.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to be a victim, to just say, well, the universe has it out for me.
It lets you off the hook.
It does. But what is so wild about this historical journey is the massive pivot that happens next.
The scientific pivot?
Right. We move from the tragic suppression of the Renaissance, from thinkers being tortured for suggesting the universe is mental, to the modern era, where the truth suddenly comes rushing back.
And not through mystics in caves this time.
No, not through mysticism, but through mathematics and physics. Science inadvertently stumbled upon what the mystics were killed for saying.
This is where we cross from esoteric philosophy into the realm of hard science, specifically quantum mechanics.
Yes, the quantum convergence. This brings us to the famous double-slit experiment. And we need to really break down the mechanics of this because it is the linchpin for how these esoteric arguments are finding validation in modern science.
The double-slit experiment is arguably the most baffling, reality-breaking experiment in the history of physics.
It really is.
It fundamentally destroys the classical Newtonian view of a clockwork universe.
So let's paint the picture for you listening. Imagine the setup. Scientists are firing subatomic particles, like individual electrons or photons, at a physical barrier that has two small vertical slits cut into it.
Right, like a wall with two doors.
Exactly. And behind that barrier is a detector screen to see where the particles land. They wanted to see how these fundamental building blocks of matter would behave.
Seems simple enough.
In classical physics, if you fire a particle, it's like a tiny bullet. It should go through one slit or the other, creating two distinct bands of impacts on the back screen.
That is what logic dictates. Solid matter traveling through space.
But that is not what happens.
Not even close.
When the scientists were not actively observing or measuring which specific slit the individual particle went through, the particle stopped acting like a solid bullet.
It completely changed its nature.
It acted like a wave. It seemingly went through both slits simultaneously, interfered with itself, and created a complex interference pattern like multiple bands of stripes on the back screen.
It's crucial to grasp the mathematical dilemma here. The mathematics of quantum mechanics, specifically the Schrödinger equation, describes the particle not as a physical object at this stage,
What does it describe it
as a wave of probability. It exists in a state of superposition. It is essentially a mathematical ghost, a mere potential of being anywhere until it is forced to materialize.
A wave of probability, just floating there.
Yes.
But then comes a reality-shattering moment.
Yeah.
The scientists decide this interference pattern is absurd. They want to know exactly which slit the electron is going
You
through.
want to catch it in the act.
So they place a measuring device, a detector, right at the slits to observe the particle.
And the very moment they do that,
The moment the act of observation occurs, the electron completely changes its behavior.
it knows it's being watched.
It abandons the wave-like interference pattern entirely. It stops acting like a wave of infinite potential, collapses into a single solid particle, and goes through just one slit, creating two simple bands on the back screen, just like a physical bullet.
This is known in physics as the collapse of the wave function.
It's mind-blowing.
And the argument presented by the esoteric framework we are discussing relies heavily on a specific interpretation of this phenomenon, often linked to the von Neumann-Wigner interpretation.
Okay, break that down for us.
This interpretation mathematically links the consciousness of the observer directly to the collapse of the wave function.
It essentially implies that reality is not fixed at all.
No, it is in a constant, hazy state of flux and infinite potential. It is only when a conscious mind observes the potential that it is forced to pick a definite physical state.
Now, in the spirit of impartiality, because we always try to give the full picture on this deep dive, we have to note that the scientific community fiercely debates this.
Oh, fiercely. It is far from settled.
Right. Many physicists prefer interpretations that don't involve human consciousness at all, like the many worlds interpretation, or decoherence caused by the macroscopic measuring instrument itself.
That's true. But the esoteric argument seizes upon the undeniable, bizarre truth that at the subatomic level, matter does not exist in a definite, localized state, independent of measurement and observation.
It's like my movie theater analogy earlier. We have always assumed we are sitting in the audience of a theater, just watching the objective movie of physical reality play out on the screen in front of us.
A passive audience.
Yeah, exactly. But the physics of the double slit experiment suggests that we are not the passive audience. We are the projector.
The light source itself.
The localized light of our conscious observation is what is actively throwing the hard image of matter onto the screen of the universe.
If you accept this synthesis of quantum mechanics and ancient Hermeticism, it completely shatters the illusion of an objective, independent universe.
Completely shatters it.
The very building blocks of your body, your house, the planet, they are entirely reliant on mental interaction to solidify.
So history agrees. Ancient alchemists agree. A specific, very profound interpretation of quantum physics agrees. We have established the what.
The universe is mental.
The universe is mental. But knowing that fact isn't enough to actually change your life. We have to understand the how.
Right, the practical application.
Because if the universe is a projection of the mind, what are the actual cosmic mechanics? How does an invisible, weightless thought turn into a tangible, physical event?
This requires a total redefinition of what the mind actually is. Because if you approach this thinking that your mind is just the gray matter inside your skull, you are still trapped in a biological, materialist worldview.
You're still thinking of the mind as a bodily organ.
Exactly. But the esoteric framework posits that the mind is a fundamental cosmic force.
Right. It's not just brain chemistry. It is a universal field of consciousness that permeates absolutely everything. It is an unbroken web connecting the smallest atom to the farthest galaxy. And because your individual consciousness is plugged directly into that cosmic web, every single thought you generate and every emotion you feel is actually a literal, tangible wave of energy.
The philosopher and religious science founder Ernest Holmes summarized this perfectly. He said, "Thoughts are things that become physical events through mental vibration."
I love that quote. Thoughts are things, not fleeting abstractions, actual energetic things.
Exactly. They are the energetic seeds of physical reality. And this brings us back to the most famous Hermetic law.
As above, so below, as within, so without.
Yes, as within, so without. Your internal psychological world strictly dictates your external physical world.
It is a one-to-one reflection. The reality you are navigating right now, like Your bank balance, your health, your stress levels is a perfect, uncompromising reflection of your dominant internal vibrations.
It is a mirror.
Now wait, I have to jump in and push back on this because we have to address the elephant in the room here.
I know exactly where you're going with this.
Yeah, because this concept sounds amazing when we're talking about getting a promotion or finding a great relationship.
Because you're manifesting good things.
But what happens when we apply this to the darker sides of life? Are we genuinely saying that a person who gets a devastating cancer diagnosis or a family that loses their home in a tragic earthquake vibrated at the wrong frequency and manifested that horror?
It's a heavy question.
Because that sounds dangerously close to victim blaming, and it feels incredibly callous.
That is the most important critique of this entire philosophy, without a doubt. And it is a point where many superficial interpretations of this material become genuinely toxic.
Yeah, the toxic positivity crowd.
Exactly. However, the deeper esoteric traditions and the logical framework of the text we are discussing approach this with much more nuance than simple victim blaming.
Okay, unpack that for me. How does this system explain tragedy without blaming the victim?
It goes back to the concept of the collective versus the individual. The universe is mental, yes, but you are not the only mind projecting reality.
Right, there are billions of us.
We are dealing with the aggregated frequency of billions of human consciousnesses. This collective mind creates macro structures of reality disease, poverty, natural disasters, systemic violence.
So these things exist on a broader scale.
They exist because the overarching human collective vibrates heavily with fear, scarcity, and conflict.
So an individual isn't necessarily manifesting a specific tragedy through their own personal bad thoughts. They might just be caught in the crossfire of the collective human frequency.
Exactly. Think of it like this. If you walk into a crowded room where everyone is smoking, you are going to inhale secondhand smoke, regardless of your personal health habits.
That makes perfect sense.
The esoteric argument is that while you may not consciously or directly manifest every single negative event that happens to you, your personal mental frequency dictates how you navigate that collective reality.
How you react to the smoke.
Yes, what you attract within it and how quickly you can transcend the macro-level chaos. You are not to blame for the hurricane, but your sovereign mind dictates whether the hurricane breaks you permanently or becomes a catalyst for a new reality.
Okay, that makes much more sense. It's less about assigning blame for the past and more about claiming ultimate agency in the aftermath.
Precisely. It's about how you move forward.
Let's use an analogy to make this mechanical for the listener. Think about a radio. The air around you right now is saturated with dozens of different radio frequencies.
Waves everywhere.
There's classical music, heavy metal, news, country, but you don't hear a cacophony of all of them at once. The physical radio receiver in your car only plays the specific station that its internal dial is tuned to.
Your internal frequency dictates your experiential reality.
Right. So if you are walking through life fundamentally tuned to a frequency of fear, chronic doubt, or a deep-seated belief in your own unworthiness, you are tuning your internal radio dial to a station that only broadcasts static and disaster.
You're locking onto that negative signal.
You are constantly emitting a vibration of lack, and the universe, acting purely as a neutral, faithful receiver, simply plays that exact music back to you in physical form. You attract bad deals, toxic people, and endless hurdles.
Because the universe is merely echoing the song you are broadcasting. It doesn't judge the song, it just plays it.
But if you want to experience something different, abundance, joy, success, you can't just scream at the radio speaker.
You don't change the station.
You can't just try to physically force the world to be kinder. You have to reach in and change the invisible dial inside your own consciousness.
And that brings us to the ultimate question. Understanding the physics and the history is intellectually stimulating, but it is useless if we don't know the practical mechanics of turning the dial.
How do we actually do it?
Exactly. How does a person actually hijack their own mental programming to alter their physical reality? The blueprint provided in these esoteric teachings demands a massive internal rewiring before any external action is taken.
And step one in this internal blueprint is creative visualization. And I want to be very clear here for everyone listening. This is not just daydreaming while you wait for the bus.
No, daydreaming is passive escape.
Right. Daydreaming is just zoning out.
True visualization is the active architectural drafting of a new reality.
The critical difference, according to this framework, is emotion. You don't just close your eyes and picture $1 million or a perfect partner as an abstract concept.
That does nothing.
You have to vividly imagine the scenario and then generate the physiological and psychological emotions of having already achieved it.
You have to trick your body into believing it's real.
You have to feel the overwhelming relief, the intense gratitude, the physical relaxation of success in your body right now.
Emotion is the crucial amplifier. In the mechanics of mental vibration, a purely intellectual thought without emotion is an incredibly weak, localized signal. It has no broadcast power.
It's just a thought in your head.
Emotion is the magnetic current. When you marry a crystal clear mental image with a highly elevated emotional state, you are effectively blasting a massive energetic blueprint into the quantum field.
Which brings us to step 2 of the internal shift, which is positive affirmations. And this is where the ancient mysticism overlaps beautifully with modern cognitive neuroscience.
It really does. It's fascinating.
Most of us have a subconscious internal monologue that is brutally negative. We constantly affirm our limitations to ourselves. I'm terrible with money, I'm always tired, nothing ever works out for me.
We are unconsciously casting spells against ourselves all day long.
Yes. So the practice of affirmations is actively hijacking that narrative. You replace it with present tense, powerful declarations. Instead of saying, I hope I get out of debt someday, you declare, I am a magnet for financial abundance.
And you repeat it relentlessly.
Relentlessly. But let's look at the science of why this actually works, because it's not magic, it's biological.
Absolutely. From a neurological standpoint, we are talking about neuroplasticity and the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
The filter in your brain.
Right. Your brain processes roughly 400 billion bits of information every single second, mostly through visual and auditory stimuli. If your conscious mind tried to process all of that, it would instantly fry.
You just short circuit.
So you have a filter at the base of your brain, the RAS, that only lets through information that your subconscious deems important.
And how does it know what's important? It listens to what you talk about the most.
Bingo.
If you constantly complain about how broke you are, your RAS literally filters out opportunities for wealth because it thinks your identity is tied to being broke.
Exactly. Affirmations are a cognitive behavioral hack. By relentlessly repeating positive declarations of abundance or health, you are forcibly rewiring the neural pathways in your brain. You are reprogramming the RAS.
You're telling it to look for different things.
Suddenly, you start noticing opportunities, connections, and resources that were literally invisible to you a week prior. You haven't magically conjured them. You have just tuned your biological receiver to finally perceive them.
This connects directly to ancient concepts, like the Logos. The idea that the spoken word has the power to bring physical reality into existence. You are literally speaking new neural networks into your brain.
It's powerful stuff.
And that leads to step 3, the power of gratitude. This framework describes gratitude as the highest possible frequency a human can hold.
Because gratitude is the absolute absence of resistance.
Think about the biological cascade of gratitude. When you are genuinely thankful, your brain decreases cortisol, the stress hormone that keeps you in survival mode.
And it floods your system with dopamine and serotonin.
Exactly. You shift from a state of fight or flight to a state of rest and digest, or more accurately in this context, perceive and create.
When you express deep gratitude for what you already have, you are sending a profoundly powerful signal to the cosmic web. You are declaring, I am full, I am satisfied, I am abundant.
And what does the universe do with that?
By universal law, the universe must match that vibration. It turns you into a massive energetic magnet that mathematically multiplies whatever you are being grateful for.
You are tuning the dial to the ultimate high-definition channel. But, and this is the part where so many people fail, internal work is only half the blueprint.
You can't just meditate your way to success.
Right. You can sit on a meditation cushion visualizing a thriving business all day, but if you never leave the house, you are just hallucinating. You have to meet the universe halfway.
This brings us to the external mechanics. And this is where the popularization of the law of attraction did a massive disservice to the actual esoteric teachings.
Oh, just think about it and it'll come. Idea.
Exactly. People started confusing the law of attraction with the law of inaction.
The mind controls everything does not mean the mind does all the physical labor for you. You cannot just think about a sculpted physique while eating junk food on the couch and expect your reality to alter.
The physical rules still apply.
Step 4 in the blueprint is establishing clear, specific intentions. The universe does not deal in vague generalities.
Saying, I want to be successful, is geometrically meaningless.
Because what does that even mean?
Success means 1,000 different things. It provides no clear target for the reticular activating system, and no clear blueprint for the quantum field to collapse into.
You have to be ruthlessly specific. Instead of, I want more money, the intention must be, I am generating $100,000 in revenue through my new consulting business by December 31st.
That level of specificity acts as a laser. It gives your mind a precise destination.
And that precise destination is what allows you to execute the final step. Action. The source material uses a brilliant formulation. The mind is the spark, but action is the combustible fuel.
I love that formulation. A spark in a vacuum just fizzles out.
You cannot plant an acorn in dry dirt, refuse to water it, and then complain to the universe that the law of attraction is a scam because you don't have an oak tree.
The watering is the action.
The physical action you take, the late night studying, the awkward networking events, the physical labor that is the water.
But this requires a massive leap of faith because we have to address how the universe actually responds. And spoiler alert, it rarely responds the way your ego wants it to.
Yes. Let's talk about that. You do the internal work, you visualize the promotion at your corporate job, you affirm your success, you vibrate with gratitude.
Everything's aligned.
And then, the very next week, you get laid off. Your immediate reaction is, this is garbage, the universe is mental, and I just manifested my own ruin.
It looks like a total catastrophic failure of the system.
But is it? Often, getting fired is the exact necessary mechanism the universe had to use to force you out of a complacent situation.
Sometimes you have to be pushed.
That layoff forces you to finally start the business you've been dreaming about, which eventually leads to 10 times the wealth and fulfillment you would have found in that cubicle. The universe responds to a complex cosmic dance.
Your mind sets the final destination, but your physical reality might have to fracture and break to build the road to get there.
That is where absolute faith comes into play. Action is the ultimate physical proof of your internal belief.
Action proves you really believe it.
If you truly believe, on a foundational vibrational level, that you are the sovereign creator of your reality and that success is inevitable, your actions will reflect an unshakable confidence, even when the immediate physical circumstances looked disastrous.
If you hesitate, if you cower and retreat into victimhood the moment things get hard, it reveals that deep down, your subconscious dial is still firmly tuned to fear and doubt.
Your actions are the final, undeniable polygraph test of your mental frequency.
It is a collaborative, ongoing dialogue with reality. The universe provides the synchronicities, the sudden inspiration, the chance encounter with a stranger, the weird coincidence.
But you have to take the step.
But you have to be the one to actively shake the hand, sign the contract, and build the physical structure. The universe unlocks the door, but you have to turn the handle and walk through it.
Wow. Okay, let's take a deep breath and pull all of this vast architecture together. We have covered a massive amount of ground today on this deep dive.
We really went everywhere.
We started in the shadows of the Egyptian pyramids with the Hermetists who first decoded that the universe is fundamentally mental. We traced how the Gnostics and Platonists refined this idea.
We looked at the violent political mechanics of suppression, how the medieval power structures recognized the ultimate threat of a spiritually sovereign human being,
Leading to the tragic martyrdom of visionaries like Giordano Bruno and the epistemological revolution sparked by Descartes,
and then we dove into the bizarre, reality-breaking mathematics of quantum physics.
where the double-slit experiment mathematically suggests that the physical world remains a wave of infinite potential until a conscious mind forces it to materialize into reality.
And finally, we laid out the rigorous psychological and esoteric blueprint for becoming the conscious architect of your own life.
It requires the internal alchemy of specific visualization, neuro-reprogramming through affirmations, and the high vibrational state of gratitude.
Coupled absolutely with the external fuel of hyper-specific intentions and relentless faith-driven action.
The overarching message here is incredibly demanding, but it is ultimately the most empowering concept a human being can internalize.
Truly.
You are not a victim of fate. You are not a helpless passenger on a rock hurtling through a cold void. You are the architect drafting the blueprint, and you are the builder laying the physical bricks of the universe.
The challenge presented by this esoteric framework is simple but terrifying. Stop accepting the limitations handed to you by society. The only barriers that actually exist are the ones you have explicitly permitted to take root in your own mind.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final deeply provocative thought to carry with you.
Let's hear it.
We talked earlier about how the macro reality of the world is a reflection of the collective human frequency. So when you look around at the state of the world right now, the chaos, the division, the endless anxiety pumped through our screens, what does that tell you about the collective station humanity has tuned its dial to?
It indicates a global crisis of consciousness.
It does. But here's the profound flip side of that equation. If the universe is genuinely mental, and if a single conscious mind altering its vibration mathematically alters the fabric of physical reality,
It changes everything.
how much immense power do you hold, starting at the exact second this audio stops playing, to begin shifting that entire global frequency simply by radically changing the vibration of your own mind?
That's the real question.
If enough sovereign individuals decide to change their internal dial, does the whole world inevitably change its physical song?
History, physics, and mysticism all point to the exact same answer. Yes.
Remember that solid brick wall we talked about at the very beginning? The one you've spent your whole life banging your head against? I think it's time you realize it's just a wave of potential.
It's waiting for you.
It's waiting for you to decide what it's going to become. Keep questioning the reality you were presented with. Keep challenging the limits you've been sold, and keep tuning your dial to a higher frequency. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.